Hello, welcome to the new episode of Advocate with Albert Abkarian, the 2019 version. Welcome, and we have a number of very interesting speakers coming up in 2019, and we thought we'll start with a bang with the one and only Councilmember Vartan Gharpetian. Thank you for accepting our invitation and coming to our show, and thank you for being here. Usually I do a background introduction from everyone, but from last year everyone knows who you are, everyone knows what you've done in the past, how involved you and your wife are in the community. So let's not spend too much time on talking about backgrounds. Let's jump right into the right to lease ordinance. I want to go right into it. We had a very difficult discussion on this issue on both sides, and somehow you were able to mediate and come with a resolution. I always say when a resolution makes everyone unhappy, it's the best resolution. But everyone seemed to be very satisfied with the results. And could you please tell us a little bit about what's going on with the city and what's going on with this new rule that you guys passed?
Of course. Thank you for the invitation. Any important issue needs heated discussions. It's healthy to have long meetings and discuss the issues that it's going to affect people's quality of life for many years to come. Right to lease ordinance, I introduced this ordinance over 3 years ago, but unfortunately, there was no support for it at that time. But these days, with the housing crisis that we have in California, it's not just a Glendale issue. We all know that it's a housing crisis, is a regional issue. California is facing over 1.1 million units short in housing. So we had to do something about the rents being hiked and the difficulties that people had. And usually when you want to pass an ordinance, you have to look at what the problem is, and you have to listen to people and see what their issues are.
On both sides of the aisle.
On both sides of the aisle. But most of the tenants, their issues were very specific. Rents are going up, we know that. And the tenants know that rents are going up everywhere. In Burbank, in Pasadena, Atwater, Palmdale, Lancaster, everywhere rents are increasing. Tahunga is $120 difference in rent versus Glendale. But the issue was the rents were being increased few times a year. Nobody had a lease, a one-year protection. So that was one of the biggest issues. The other issue was that people were purchasing new apartments when the ownership changes, and they would just increase the rent tremendously. And so if you don't want it, you can leave. Or it was kind of like increasing rent was kind of an eviction tool that they had. So we addressed that as well. So if you purchase a property, you cannot increase the rent 1 year from the last.
So let's do that. Let's understand what the new regulation is. So could you please go over what the new regulation says, both for the homeowners and the apartment owners and for the tenants, to know what the law actually says?
Sure, in a nutshell, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Because it's a long ordinance.
No. Just
the important parts are, first, everyone has to be offered, the landlords have to offer a one-year lease to every tenant when the ordinance takes effect in mid-March. That's one thing. Second is the one that I mentioned.
That's you have to be in the City of Glendale, first of all.
This is a City of Glendale ordinance.
It has nothing to do with anyone else except people in the City of Glendale.
Right. This only takes effect in Glendale.
Okay.
First, landlords have to offer it. The tenant doesn't have to take it.
Right.
But they have to be offered a one-year lease. From that date on, the landlord can only increase the rent 7% a year for 1 year. But if they want to increase more than 7% and the tenant cannot pay the rent and they want to relocate, then the landlord has to pay a relocation fee. And there's a sliding scale. If you live there 3 years, you get 3 months the rent for relocation fee, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. And there's a cap on 6 years, 6 months relocation fee. Rents the amount of 6 months of rent for relocation fee. And that's your relocation fee. That gives tenants some protection. So if they want to get up and move and go somewhere else, because the market is changing and There's more inventory out there. So
plus, you want a first and last. By the time you
Right.
get your refund, it might take a little bit longer. So
Yes.
this gives the tenants that don't want to get the large increase some kind
Protection.
of a protection for them to be able to get a first, last, and some moving costs.
right. And again, that 1-year lease will protect the tenants from several increases every
During the year.
And if there's a new owner, they cannot increase your rent 12 months from the last increase. So because if I wanted to sell my property to somebody, for example, to you, I would increase my rent and sell it to you, come in and increase the rent again within a few months.
40% increase in rate, 20%.
It happened, and that just puts a cap on that. It's an ordinance that protects the tenants, and it's an ordinance that's also fair to the landlords. Many of the landlords who are in this business, who are long-term holders, they don't have any issue with it. The only people who have issue with it are the ones that they want to increase all the rents, tremendously increase their cap, flip the property, and move on. And when you said that when there is an ordinance passed and both sides are unhappy, that means there was a compromise, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
So it will take effect this month, and we have to let this ordinance work. We have to let this ordinance function so we can see if they have to button it up, if you have to tighten it up, or if you have to do other changes, make other changes to it. But we have to let the ordinance work for 2 years at least to see what the results are.
Some people want to bring in a Santa Monica type of ordinance in Glendale, which you're trying to fit something that doesn't fit, unfortunately, and
Right.
kind of have a no more than 1%, 2% increase a year. Landlords you can't do it for 24 months. I mean, some crazy things. And I always tell people, if I wanted to live in Santa Monica, I would go to Santa Monica. I wouldn't live in Glendale. But if you live in Glendale and asking for Santa Monica type of restrictions, then I am completely against it. Why would we agree to it? And it's not one size fits all. Every city has its own unique set of circumstances.
That's right.
And this is why this right to lease ordinance really speaks to a Glendale type of solution.
Sure. Oftentimes they compare Glendale to Santa Monica, Long Beach, Beverly Hills, or some of the cities, or Anaheim. When the budget comes, we compare everything to 10 different cities, comparable cities. But Santa Monica, if you look at Santa Monica, it's one of the highest rents in California. Look at San Francisco, highest rents, one of the highest rent cities in California. So the system they have is not working.
Yeah.
And in last 10 years, rents in Glendale was increased about 2% less than what was increased in LA. And LA has full-blown rent control. So the system that they had, there are a lot of loopholes, and the loopholes are the issues that people have. And they're using those loopholes to increase the rent a lot more than it shows on the paper. But our residents' issue is, say people moved to Glendale 30, 40 years ago, and now they are senior citizens. This is the segment of the community that needs the most help, and that is our seniors. They moved here, they work, they pay their taxes, they're on Social Security, they get like husband and wife get two Social Securities. It's $1,400, $1,500, and the rent is $1,300, right? No matter what you do, if you have a cap on rent, no increases, 5% increase, 2%, 2 years later, they're still are going to have a hard time. So my goal is to help that segment of the community first, and we can speak about it today, talk about it, and that was the Measure S that we passed, and those funds that we kept in Glendale. It was a tough decision as well.
You had two tough decisions. One was the right to lease. Was that what it's called?
Right to lease ordinance.
Yes. And that was at a year when next year you're going to get elected. That was a very tough one. And then the Measure S. So you took on two tough decisions, made the right decisions on both, and they're both going to substantially help Glendale. So with that, let's segue into Measure S. Why should we pay more taxes?
Right.
Mr.
That was the questions the question that I was being asked, but especially from the business community, because it affects business.
Of course.
And our taxes were 9.5%, sales tax was 9.5%, and we voted to put a ballot measure for people to vote, for voters to vote, to make that 10.25, which is the cap. The state cannot get more than 10.25 sales tax on any item. So it was a tough decision, and this issue of the election next year or tough decisions. We have Grayson Power Plant coming, we have biogas project coming, we have South Glendale community plant. It's in the works. We have so many other issues. Downtown specific plan. We have moratorium. We voted for a moratorium that never happened in downtown to make sure that we will do the right thing, because I was not happy in some of the developments that was going on. So I voted for that too. And these are all in the, and overall.
Let's do this.
Right.
Because this Measure S and what's actually going on is so important.
Right.
That I want to give it the full extent of it. So let's take a quick break.
Okay.
Let's come back and let's go into Measure S and some of the other topics that I want to talk about.
Okay.
We'll be right back right after this commercials. Welcome back. Again, we are here with Honorable Vartan Gharpetian, our council member from City of Glendale, and we've discussed the right to lease ordinance, and we were going to kind of go into Measure S and why we should pay the additional taxes. No one likes to pay taxes, but why we need to have them and how it's going to help Glendale. Go ahead, Councilman.
Right. It was a tough decision to ask your constituents to tax themselves, basically.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was a year prior to that, in 2017, county passed a measure. It's called Measure H, a homeless initiative, and Glendale, it's on a countywide measure. So it passed, and Glendale residents paid about $10 million out of the taxes that we paid. That 0.25% was $10 million, and we contributed $10 million to that Measure H, but we received only $330,000 back.
Wow.
So it was like, why are we doing this? So we wanted to keep those dollars in Glendale. Hopefully Measure S will generate $30 million that will stay in Glendale, and we can use those funds to better the quality of life in Glendale. Now, right now, one of the biggest issues and the toughest issues, the most important issue that we have is housing. We can fund housing projects, affordable housing projects with Measure H funding. We already voted for a subsidy program for 1,000 families, seniors, to receive, to close that gap that they were, I was talking about the seniors who are couple and they get $1,500, $1,400, and they need $200, $300 more a month in subsidy to close that gap and have a decent life. A life with dignity, if you will. So Measure H funding can help that. This is not a program that you get that funding forever, but it will help people to get out of trouble at this time. Currently, AQMD has a 0.5% measure that is coming most probably for 2020. And if we didn't have this, if we didn't pass Measure S, that 0.5% is $20 million.
Would have gone to the state. Now,
explain
to the viewers why is it that even though a tax is being passed statewide, that it cannot be added to the 10.25?
That's a state law. That's a state law.
That
says that the maximum taxes that state can collect, sales tax that state collect, is 10.25. So Long Beach did that a couple of years ago. So Measure H does not apply to Long Beach. They don't pay anything in Measure H.
So
they kept their dollar.
Let's understand, because I didn't understand that, and I was against Measure S until I understood the importance of it. Right. Basically, if you don't add that additional dollar, make it 10.25, and there's, let's say, 50 cents still available, and it was 9.5, let's say,
half a percent.
And if it's a 0.5%, and If the city didn't have that, then that money goes to the state for the
Right.
EQMD.
State can pass a measure, the county can pass a measure statewide or countywide, and those funds will go to that specific fund that the measure is passed for.
But because the city passed the taxes that we did, and because the taxes are capped at 10.25, all of that additional dollars stays in the city of Glendale instead of going to the other
Yes,
entities.
the $30 million that Measure S is going to generate will stay in Glendale.
Yeah.
Now, tomorrow, if you have a park you want to build, whatever that the city needs, you can use those dollar amounts.
Yes.
And bear in
Soccer
mind,
fields.
soccer fields, my favorite one, of course. But overall, because of the property taxes, the difference in property taxes that we get versus Pasadena and Burbank, ours is very low. We get 13 cents on every dollar as property tax to come back to Glendale.
Yeah.
Pasadena's is 24 cents.
Wow.
And Burbank is almost 20 cents. Wow. So it's important. It was a tough decision, but it was important to explain to people. And that's why I went to so many different TV programs, gave so many interviews. I went on TV and news. And
Some very unfair to you, by the way, I have to say, but it is what it is. There's not much you can do when somebody just doesn't listen to both sides and takes one side and wants to attack you. But you handled it very nicely, and that's appreciated.
It is what it is. I mean, you are in this position when you're elected. You are a fair game, basically. People will have opinion, and I respect their opinions. I disagree with most of the comments that was made, but now they understand that Measure H can come back and increase it by 1/4 of a point.
Yeah.
So all the 3/4 would have been gone.
Right.
3/4% would have been gone. And I wanted to keep the money in our in our city and serve our residents.
Exactly.
Why not? So
let me ask you a question. There's a lot of people who come to Glendale for a little while and want change, that have not had history in the city, don't understand the public, don't understand the constituents, and basically coming from outside of the city and want to do a revolution. Some people want to do a union, some people want to do other things. You've been in the city how long now?
I lived in the city for over 20 years, but I was in and out of Glendale since 1986. So I met my wife here in 1989. So
and beautiful wife, and a very, very, very qualified, nice person. Not only as a board member, but as just a person and a human being. Tell me why that background of being in the city this long and being involved in the community is important to understand what goes on in here to solve problems.
Well, people who move to Glendale, they moved to Glendale in recent years, they're somewhat uninformed because they believe that this council, like me, I voted for every project that was built in downtown specific plan, which I had nothing to do with any of them. I wasn't there when the downtown specific plan was approved, and I did not vote for not even one project that is built or is currently being built in downtown. All the mega projects, the complexes, the apartment complexes, I did not vote for. But because they move here, they believe you are the council member now, you voted for this. Or you voted for a crosswalk, a diagonal crosswalk or four-way crosswalk, which I had nothing to do with. When I got elected, it was approved. Or we have, properties that are historic properties and people are very sensitive to it, and rightfully so. And we want to protect our historic properties and our history. But they believe that somehow it's taken a long time when this property was, for example, Rockhaven was purchased in 2008, but I was elected in 2015. So that 7 years or 8 years in between, I had no control over what can be done on that property. So people who are uninformed, they make wrong comments, if you will.
Or people want to sensationalize things and want to get people riled up, so they do it intentionally.
Right. I mean, it's again, that's the name of the game. That's some people know how to play that game better than the others, but it's fine. I mean, the voting records are there, and some people told me, "Oh, you're not sensitive for homeless people," and that's not true. And in 2015, I was the one who really put some people in touch with the city to have a homeless shelter in Glendale to serve few hundred people instead of only 80 people, because we had the El Nino coming that year, and the LASA, which is the county organization, they mandated every city to have its own shelter that year, and you can't just not have it, and we didn't have a place for it. So I was very instrumental in putting that together, and the owners of these properties, they really went out of their way to accommodate. They brought temporary showers, they painted the property, they cleaned it up, they've done a tremendous amount of work and gave it for free or for very, very, very small amount for, it was supposed to be for 4 months, but they stayed there for 7, 8 months. So people don't know, and you cannot explain every single move that you made in 4 years.
You announced you're running for office in 2020.
Yes.
And rightfully so. You and Ms. Devine are probably the two most qualified people running for office at this time. I wanted to also say that there are some discussions as to, well, the renters are going to vote you out, and there's always two sides. The property owners are not outside people coming in here. 90% of them are Glendalians who've basically put in their life into an apartment. I don't own one in Glendale, but again, they put their lives into this, and to basically consider them as outsiders and say, well, it doesn't matter about the property owners, the renters are the only thing that's important, in my opinion, is the wrong thing to do. There has two sides to the story always.
Right. I mean, every resident, I'm here to represent the entire Glendale, and every resident is important to me. Most of them don't even, they're not registered to vote, or they're not even a citizen of the United States to be able to vote. But my goal is to serve every single one of them, to help every single resident. Otherwise, I mean, people see our voting records are public record. They will see who did a better job or who did a good job or who was true to their campaign and the promises that I made before I got elected. I was looking at my flyers. It's exactly what I've been talking about on the dais for the last 4 years. So,
well, thank you. You're going to be coming back again, I'm sure, in 2019, and we'll continue this discussion again. Thank you for accepting our 2019 initial event. We started 2018 with your comments and starting 2019 with you as well. Best of luck to you in your 2020 campaign, and hopefully we'll hear more about it in coming years.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Again, I wanted to thank you for joining us. Advocate will be back again with new guests, new shows, talking to politicians, entertainers, sports figures, and hopefully we'll notify you in advance as to what our show would be next month, and we'll see you very soon. Good night.